Hello and welcome. I'm Pretti and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he raises the Jimmy Lai case and Uyghur rights with the President of China, Xi Jinping. He also said talks make progress on trade, travel and resetting UK-China relations. Iran says its armed forces are ready to respond immediately to any US strike. The warning comes as President Trump reiterates military threats and US forces deployed to the region. European Union foreign ministers are expected to list Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist group. The move follows a deadly crackdown on protests, European Union's top diplomat says. Two US federal agents involved in the fatal shooting of intensive care nurse Alex Pretti during an immigration operation in Minneapolis have been placed on administrative leave as per the DHS. The move follows a national outrage over the death and comes as protests and scrutiny of federal enforcement continue. Israel's parliament gives initial approval to the 2026 state budget, averting an immediate early election. The spending plan still faces a tough final vote amid coalition divisions. Dozens are killed after RSF drones hit the town of Dilling in South Kordofan. Local media report the strikes target military positions and a central market. China executes 11 people linked to Myanmar-based scam gangs. As per state media reports, Beijing says the move targets key figures in cross-border cybercrime. A plane crash in northeast Colombia kills all 15 on board, including a local lawmaker. The aircraft loses contact minutes after departing Qatar for a short flight to Okina. All right, on to the top focus now. We're looking at US now. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, that's the ICE officers in Minnesota, have been given new operational instructions directing them not to engage with agitators during enforcement actions following two deadly shootings of US citizens earlier this month. However, under the new guidelines, officers are now instructed to focus only on immigrants with criminal charges or convictions. ICE agents are required to use megaphones to issue clear commands and prioritize arrests linked to criminal activity. This policy shift follows the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti, with an exclusive video obtained by American media outlet that shows his confrontation with ICE officers before his death. Furthermore, the change aligns with President Trump's efforts to de-escalate tension in the state after the controversial shootings. Joining me now in this discussion is Madhav Nalapat. He's the editorial director at the Sunday Guardian and joins us from New Delhi. Mr. Nalapat, thanks very much for joining me. Do you think the new guidelines that have come in are rather too late? Did two people really have to die for Trump to reflect and issue these new directives?
Well, I'd like to point out that so far as the ICE shootings are concerned, I think a majority of American citizens have had their conscience stirred, and I'm talking also of MAGA elements. The fact is that this is, ICE officers believe, they're like, oh, 007, they can get away with murder. And many of them have precisely done that. They have gotten away with murder because Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem is basically giving blanket immunity to them by always defending their acts. Now, finally, I think the White House is awakened to the fact that this is proving very unpopular with American people when they see American citizens being shot down in cold blood by what looks like, commandos from another planet almost. Then I think the American citizens also are turning against the tactics of ICE, and as a consequence, they are basically becoming hostile to President Trump So that's why the White House had to soften its tone, especially after the Pretti shooting, when a person was gunned down in cold blood, and Christine Noem wrongly said that he pulled a gun. But actually, none of the visuals show that he pulled any gun. He was shot in cold blood. In fact, he raised his hands in surrender when he was shot. So the reality of the situation is this is proving highly unpopular with the American public, and as a consequence, the White House is having to backtrack, and that's why now they're going softer on that. That's going to stop ICE from carrying out these almost murderous attacks on innocent citizens on suspicion that they're foreign uh, immigrants or not. And even if you're a foreigner and you're a visitor in the United States, you will be subject to this kind of horrible treatment. So now the United States is no longer a safe country to go to. As a consequence, tourist footfalls have fallen very sharply. And overall, I would like to say that something better be done about ICE. Otherwise, the White House is going to face serious problem in the 2026 midterms. Thank you.
Right, Madhav Nalapet, that's exactly my next question to you was, given the statements that have come in from Kristi Noem, she's accused Rennie Good of weaponizing her car, then said for invoking domestic terrorism charges on her, and the actions of ICE and the federal versus state control that the conversation that these incidents have erupted a conversation on. How much do you think is going to impact the midterms?
Look, again, now let's not turn to Greenland. And where Greenland is concerned, I'd like to say that President Trump wants Greenland. Denmark has control over Greenland, and the entire European Union and the UK are joined together in opposing that. So I think President Trump is having to backtrack quite a bit on this. I don't know what he wants from Greenland, most likely the rare earths or something else like that, but he can do that in a much better way than threatening and bullying and cajoling. And of course, I mean, force is absolutely off the table. If force is used at the end of NATO, but even now the behavior of President Trump, where he is selectively joining some wars that the rest of NATO are involved in or selectively not joining, NATO is effectively a split organization. So I want to point out, as far as Greenland is concerned, I think there's a united front of the EU and a united front including the UK, where it's very, very clear that
Professor
Greenland
Nalapat,
must
we
be
were still
controlled.
discussing the
So
ICE
that's the
shootings.
point.
I'm sorry, I'd have to interrupt you there. I was asking you about how these ICE shootings and the fatal killings and the statements that have come in from Kristi Noem and Trump himself are going to impact his midterm prospects.
Look, I mean, the Danish foreign minister and the other high officials are expressing a lot of satisfaction and confidence. They don't want to provoke President Trump anymore. They know that if you express something which he doesn't like, he may get provoked and take even extreme actions. So that is a problem. So they're speaking in very diplomatic language, but at the same time, frankly, I think the United States under President Trump, what they want is much more than what the Danes are prepared to give. So I think sooner or later, one or the other side will have to relent. And in my view, judging from the international situation and the international outcry over Greenland, it'll have to be the United States under President Trump. I think overall the Trump administration is making itself deeply unpopular in the European Union and of course within the UK and and also now within the local population of the United States because of the ICE killings in so many locations, including that absolutely point-blank murder of Pretti in Minneapolis. And so I want to point out that President Trump better change his ways, or the American voter who voted for him just 1 year ago will have changed their mind by the midterms and vote against him and his party. And that's going to be a disaster for the Republicans. It'll be a disaster for him, because then he'll be a lame duck president for the remainder of his term. Thank you.
Right. Thanks very much, Mr. Nalapat, then for joining us in this discussion. Moving ahead, viewers, let's give you the latest on Greenland now. Talks between Denmark, Greenland and the United States over the Arctic territory have been described as constructive by Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen. Speaking ahead of a meeting with European Union counterparts in Brussels, Rasmussen said discussions held on Wednesday went well but had not yet produced any conclusions. He added that he was slightly more optimistic than he had been a week earlier. The diplomatic talks follow months of tension between Denmark and the United States, both NATO allies. The strained relations were triggered by repeated demands from US President Donald Trump to take over Greenland, a move strongly rejected by Denmark and Greenlandic leaders. All right, we now move on. Viewers, now British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that he raised the human rights concerns during his talks in Beijing today. To discuss the trial of Hong Kong pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai, as well as China's broader human rights record. He said the conversation with China's leadership was respectful and frank, stressing that stronger ties must allow room for disagreement. Starmer added that engaging China creates opportunities for cooperation while also making space for open dialogue on sensitive issues. His comments come as London seeks a more stable and constructive relationship with Beijing. Joining me now in this discussion is Collins.
He raised those issues as you would expect. Part of the rationale for engagement is to make sure that we can both seize the opportunities that are available, which is what we've done, but also have a mature discussion about issues that we disagree on.
All right, viewers, before we are joined in by our guests, let's give you more details on this meet between Starmer and Xi Jinping. Of course, the issue of visa-free travel has seen some progress in this visit. Whiskey tariffs were also discussed. Those are some of course, the key pointers. But the meeting between the two leaders, of course, is a rather crucial one. A lot of updates, in fact, coming in. The relationship is in good and strong place, is what Starmer said after productive talks with Xi. And the Prime Minister, of course, said that progress has been made on whiskey tariffs and visa-free travel to China, and also raised the jailing of Jimmy Lai with Xi Jinping. The PM also said that the countries will maintain frank and open dialogue on areas of disagreements. Xi, meanwhile, said that there have been twists and turns in China-UK ties, but went on to say that engagement is unavoidable. Let's in fact now welcome Collins Chong-Yu-Ki, to the Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst, and joins us from Kuala Lumpur. Collins, thanks very much for joining us. Firstly, what do you think are some of the biggest takeaways from the meeting between the two leaders, and how are they going to tread on this newly strengthened bilateral relationship?
Well, both sides will treat this carefully. We have seen how, both have been careful not to also sideline traditional partners, especially with the case of UK. UK is trying to de-risk without fully decoupling, and of course also China will want to see what are the red lines being set by the UK in terms of these discussions. And of course also we've seen how Beijing is also trying to gauge the positions of Starmer, and we have seen also the need for UK to consolidate further economic integration, especially now the economic conditions of the UK has not been promising. And also, the issues being raised here in terms of Jimmy Lai, in terms of, in Xinjiang and the Uyghurs. This is also part of a strategic move, by Starmer to ensure that, to also appease domestic audience and, domestic needs. He wants to show that, these relations can be maintained. On talking terms, but without also compromising on the stance on human rights, on also on these difficult issues. And of course, this will need to be raised. But as I've stated, I don't see this as a stumbling block to both sides. And of course, this is part of the needed, as part of the continuation of the needed issues that would need to be raised by the UK without being seen as selling out the traditional stance of the UK in terms of these issues. But the main prominent points will be on resetting talks on a new way forward in terms of economic partnership, in terms of critical sectors. But on sensitive sectors, including on tech restrictions on semiconductor and chips, these are also being, they have to tread carefully on this, especially with the new pressure by Washington. And of course, also Beijing is trying to capitalize on this to send a very, promising message to the global south, to its current and allies, that it still has this friend in the UK, despite the moves by the Trump administration to enforce greater pressure on Beijing.
Yeah. And how do you think really the US will be watching this meeting going ahead, and the relationship between China and the UK?
Well, as I've stated, this is expected, and I don't see this as to raise an alarming, kind of, sign to the Trump administration. Then we've seen how this is not, only being confined to the case of the UK. We've seen this has happened before in the case of France, in the case of Canada, and of course all nations will want also to seek greater fallback options, and of course also for friend-sharing efforts. To safeguard their own economic interests amidst these new uncertainties, and also potential strains in the ties with the US in terms of securing this promising economic future. But of course also these nations, especially the UK and Canada and other European nations, will need also to tread this carefully in terms of also not to be seen as selling out the need to have this kind of the importance of the security ties with the US. So they have been capitalizing on this strategic hedging with more careful manner now, and we have seen also how despite this overture to China in terms of resetting ties, this security umbrella, security partnership with the US still remains strong. Of course, London would still need to depend on the US in terms of having this security partnership, but on the economic partnership, you need to explore greater, in terms of platforms, in terms of confidence, in terms of trust, and in terms of also expanding the market access and other economic benefits that will be of great importance to the UK, especially in this timeline.
Sure. Collins, one final question, so long as we are on this discussion. How do you see UK's economy gaining really if trade boosts with China? Of course, the country is seeing its economy in doldrums right now. How much can it gain from these strengthened ties?
Well, I don't see any kind of promising real-time gains, especially during the initial timeline. This is just a very preliminary stage, to, of course, to have this kind of mutual agreements on what will be the key areas that will need to have further improvements without infringing on the sensitive areas that will be of great importance to both sides. And of course, China is still probing what are the red lines being set by Britain, and of course we have seen how also sensitive sectors will need to be protected, and the need also to be seen to be aligned with the greater support or efforts by Washington in terms of restricting Chinese access to these technologies. Of course, also with regards to the sanctions in place on energy, and how this will also will be important for the UK not to be seen as alluding or to be agreeable to these efforts or any actions taken by China that will be of great risk or harm to the Western Hemisphere as a whole. So there are a lot of this pressure in place. There's a lot of restrictions, a lot of uncertainties, and for both to navigate further. But this is the first step being taken after years of these relations being the doldrum, and of course both will want to seek greater confidence in moving forward and to have these mutual benefits. But I don't see this to be beyond the optics that we have seen. To have any tangible benefits, especially to Britain, it will still need to rely very much on the conventional methods for now, and to reassure allies in Europe, and of course to reassure the Trump administration that this is not something that is, at the expense of the other.
Right. All right, Collins, thanks for your comments. They are requested to stay on. Moving ahead now, viewers, Vietnam and the European Union have pledged to deepen economic and security cooperation, upgrading their diplomatic relationship to hedge against an increasingly unpredictable United States. European Council President Antonio Costa has said that the European Union are elevating Vietnam relationship to the highest level of a comprehensive strategic partnership. However, Vietnam's President Luong Quoc has called the upgrade to Vietnam's highest level partnership as a new landmark reflecting sincere and mutual trust. Let's first listen in to what Antonio Costa and then Luong Quoc had to say.
A significant new milestone. We are elevating our relationship to the highest level, a comprehensive and strategic partnership. This upgrade fully captures the depth and breadth of our collaboration to date and our expectations for its future evolution on trade, on green and digital transition, on security, on people-to-people ties.
Nâng cấp quan hệ và chuyến thăm quan trọng này cũng là những minh chứng sinh động cho đường lối đối ngoại đa phương hóa, đa dạng hóa quan hệ của Việt Nam. Coi EU là một trong những đối tác quan trọng hàng đầu trên thế giới và mong muốn tiếp tục thúc đẩy và làm sâu sắc hơn nữa quan hệ với EU.
All right, I request Collins to join us back in this discussion. Collins, what we are seeing right now is that European Union is clearly leaving no stone unturned in strengthening its ties with all the emerging economies. We had the India-European Union trade agreement, and now, of course, elevating the partnership with Vietnam. What is really the continent planning?
Well, this is also part of the efforts to, as I've stated, also with what the UK has been doing now, and France and Canada, and now, of course, the EU is also trying to have this insulation in terms of these fallback options to diversify economic support in anticipating this greater pressure in terms of protectionist measures, in terms of also uncertainties coming from Washington. This is also part of the broader efforts to have this kind of multi-alignment strategy, hedging, and to see this part of the world, Southeast Asia and ASEAN, as the new gateway. And of course, also we have seen also this is also a continuation of this conventional plans to expand market access and to secure the supply chain resilience, energy transition, and critical sectors also. Of course, and that will include semiconductors, critical minerals, and all that. So Vietnam has always been at the forefront of these ventures, and also the location of Vietnam as being seen as a part of the also China +1 strategy, and this will the EU needed this very much, especially now, and we have seen how this is also needed by Vietnam in terms of expanding market access, technologies, investments, and for EU sees Vietnam as also a new gateway to ASEAN apart from Malaysia, in terms of solidifying supply chain to get also the needed market access and the support system in terms of these new sectors of the economy. So it's a mutually beneficial venture for both sides, and it's hardly surprising. And also the importance of Vietnam as the connector between continental Southeast Asia and maritime Southeast Asia, connecting South Asia, Central Asia to South China Sea and to the Pacific. And of course, this is also being looked into in the long term as to the new potential values of Vietnam in this equation.
Right, Collins, thanks very much then for weighing in your opinion on this. And we now move on, viewers. As always, before we wrap up the bulletin, some technology news. Now, Microsoft shares have dropped over 6% after the company reported slower cloud revenue growth in its fiscal second quarter. Regardless of spending a record $37.5 billion on capital expenditure, including a significant investment in AI, Microsoft's cloud revenue growth only met analysts' expectations with a 39% rise. Meanwhile, increasing competition from Google's Gemini and other AI initiatives is threatening Microsoft's market share. CEO Satya Nadella, however, disclosed that Microsoft now has 15 million annual users for M365 Copilot, but investors remain concerned about the rising costs of memory chips and AI investments. Furthermore, Microsoft's capital spending is expected to decrease in the next quarter, although its cloud business backlog has more than doubled to $625 billion. However, about 45% of this backlog is linked to OpenAI, raising concerns about Microsoft's reliance on its partner. And viewers, that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.